Good afternoon, everybody. This is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore, and we're here with another of our virtual events this afternoon. And today we have Swedish crime writer Johanna Mo joining us. Hope I said that vaguely close to accurate, with her new book, The Night Singer. Let me cover that up. And Johanna, would you hold up the Swedish language version? It's neat to compare. That's gorgeous. The different cover designs.
Yeah.
And I am going to be largely in the background monitoring the comments. So if you have questions for Johanna, go ahead and put them in and I'll reemerge to ask them towards the end of the program. And also we have some photographs to show, so I'll show those when I'm asked. In the meantime, Barbara is tuning in from her home office and I will turn it over to you for the moment, Barbara.
Thank you very much, Patrick. It's really a delight to welcome another author from Stockholm, Sweden, because Camilla Lackberg is somebody we have talked to. And the time difference means that it's 9 in the evening in Stockholm while it's noon here. But I can tell you from my extensive travels in Sweden that it's still daylight in Stockholm.
The sun is beginning to set now.
It is. And in that beautiful Swedish cover, the bridge is a feature, and it's something we'll talk about in relation to the landscape of The Night Singer, because the bridge is an important link. When you travel around the Baltic and go to Stockholm, an island off the southeast coast of Sweden, I hope I'm remembering this, called Visby, right? I haven't mixed that up with something else.
No.
Right. Has a fortress, has a lot. Sweden was a real superpower back in the 17th century. And so if you go there, I've been to castles and actually attended, believe it or not, entirely by accident, a Renaissance fair in a castle on the lake that is west and slightly north of Stockholm. You probably know its name.
I think I should know it, but
well, anyway, it was a real surprise because we drove up to visit the castle and realized that we were being escorted by knights in armor, and there were people, with bows and arrows out in the field, and it was all wonderful. And when we went inside, it was a beautiful 18th century interior, but it was medieval in terms of the food offering and all. And my experience in Sweden is that you can almost do nothing without incredible food and a lot of alcohol. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, I would say that's fair.
Okay, so Johanna is a literary critic with several crime novels under her belt. This is her first book, The Night Singer, to publish in the US, and a translation to English by Alice Menzies. And it's the first, and I believe the series title is called The Island Mysteries.
Yeah, it is.
That seem right?
Yeah.
Right. And so the island in question, I'm going to wing it here, but Johanna can pronounce it better. It's called Öland. Is that close?
Öland. Yeah, close enough.
It's really hard to get the vowels right in Swedish. I mean, it's just very difficult. But anyway, and I mentioned Visby because it's in the same general area, right? It's not that far from the Swedish coast. And so is there a bridge between the island, or is it the bridge between the smaller community, Kalmar?
No, there's a bridge to Kalmar, which is a city on the mainland. The bridge is quite long. It's 6 kilometers. And it was built in the 70s, so it hasn't always been there. People used the ferry before to get over, but now the bridge is there.
If any of you have been to Prince Edward Island in southeastern Canada, there is a similar thing. There is a very long span bridge. And interestingly enough, they only charge you toll one way. I'm trying to remember. I think you can go to the island for free, but you can't get off it without paying the toll to go back to the mainland, which I think is pretty clever. Or you can take the ferry. And so I mention all this because even though this book takes place on an island, and presumably the series will, it's still connected to mainland Sweden. So it's really not that big a job to go back and forth.
No, yeah, because I wanted to be as close to reality as possible. And the police who investigate serious crimes on Öland are situated in Kalmar. So that's where my detective works. So they have to go over the bridge many times.
Right. And obviously it would be a lot more difficult if they were constantly using the ferry. Anyway, the detective is called Hannah. Hannah.
Don't care.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so I'm really reluctant to try to pronounce Swedish. It's just so hard. So why don't you tell us about, because she has a really interesting backstory, and her personal life, her life experience has a great deal to do with the novel and shadows the investigation. So why don't you tell us about Hannah?
Yeah, Hannah grew up on Öland, and she had a very happy childhood there until she was about 12. Then her mother died suddenly, and her father started drinking. And yeah, she was the one just trying to keep the family together. She has an older brother as well, but he was reacting kind of like her father, just running wild and drinking and doing things. And then the week Hannah was graduating, her father was arrested for murder. And Hannah's reaction was to run. She moved to Stockholm and started working as a police detective. And her father spends a lot of years in prison, and then he moves back to Öland and starts drinking again, and eventually kills himself by drinking. And when Hannah moves, she goes back to Öland to clean out her childhood house, and then she just feels very strongly that she needs to go back. She hasn't dealt with what happened, and she needs to do that. And also she realizes how much she misses Öland, just being there. She hasn't had a very happy life in Stockholm. Well, and that's when the Night Singer starts. It starts with her moving back and starting to work for the Kalmar police instead.
Well, even though she hasn't had a very happy life in Stockholm, the truth is she's not likely to have had a very happy life anywhere until some resolution. She tried to run away. That doesn't really work.
It didn't work.
Why did she decide? I mean, did she have any previous training or desire to be a police detective before she went to Stockholm? Why did she take up policing?
I think there are two reasons. One is that she feels that she, with her experience, could do a good job. And also, she has this feeling that something went wrong, that her father isn't guilty, but at the same time, she realizes it is a defense. She doesn't want him to be guilty. That's what it's about. So, and she starts to do that in The Night Singer. She wants to find out what happened. She wants to find out more about the murder. I mean, she never talked with her father about it. She couldn't. It was too hard to talk about.
I've watched a lot of Swedish crime shows. You know, the streaming television has enabled us to not only Sweden, there's a killer one set in Finland and Iceland, various places. And the justice system seems to me to take I don't know what the right word is here. People are not necessarily locked up for the length of time for various crimes as they might be here in the United States. And so even someone convicted of murder might conceivably be released back into the community sooner than we would expect. Are there any sentences with life without parole?
No, there aren't.
I don't think so.
I think if the person is mentally ill, they can keep them for life, but not just as a prison sentence. I think the sentences are longer now, but Hannah's father was convicted in the early 90s, and he spent 10 years in prison, which I think was a quite common length then.
Well, I only mention it because, American readers might think
Yeah.
that 10 years in prison for murder was a
Yeah,
little
no,
light.
yeah, no, he
But
spent 10
nonetheless,
years.
yep, that's how it works. And so he does go back to the island, but he apparently is unable to escape the prison that surrounds him emotionally. And so he drinks to cope with it, and eventually dies. So Hannah's in the position of wanting to find out what happened, but the best witness, i.e. her father, is now dead. So
Yeah.
she's not going to be able to get the story from him.
No, the woman who was killed has a daughter who's still living on the island.
Right. So there's some continuity there.
Yeah.
However, the murder.
And the Hannah's new boss is actually the person who investigated her father, who put him behind bars. So,
right,
she can talk to him as well.
Well, I mean, she obviously you had to give her some sort of entry point into an investigation. Otherwise it would be completely helpless. So, so there she is. But the murder, I mean, her father's death is not the murder or the death that she investigates after the book gets going. So tell us a little bit about the murder victim and the case that begins to challenge Hannah as she's settling in back on the island.
Yeah, that's a 15-year-old called Joel, and he's found dead on the Alvar. It's called, that's a large limestone terrace in the south of Ireland. It's a very barren place, very flat. And shortly before Hannah is to go to Joel's mother and tell her that her son is dead, Hannah realizes that the mother is her old friend. She has a new last name now, but Hannah recognizes her from the photo on the driver's license. And she decides to keep quiet about it because she really wants to go there. She wants to help her friend and make amends because she abandoned her all those years ago. So
well, this would be a good time you send us some photos of the island in order to make the landscape of this book a little clearer. Patrick has some photos that he can show us, and Johanna can tell us what they are.
Yeah, this is the Alvar. It's very flat, and then not a lot of things grow there.
It is very flat and also relatively barren. And is that an old stone wall? Is that there's a lot of those.
There are old stone walls all across Ireland. Okay. Ireland has been people have been living there since the Stone Age. So there are ancient remains everywhere, and this is the Alvar as well.
And this is that you have a little cairn or stone tower there, and I understand. I read a really interesting article yesterday that said this has become a kind of tourist thing that in places like Scotland that there are contests to build as high as you can these stone cairns, but it's very disconcerting to hikers and other people. So a new sport, in fact, involves kicking them over if you're a passing tourist and you see one of these things. So is this an old one or a tourist made one?
No, a tourist made it.
Okay. All right, Patrick.
Yeah, and this is me on the Alvar. On the other side of the road is where Joel's found. It's a rest area.
And it's a wonderfully distinctive roof. Tell us a little bit about it. It's fascinating.
Oh, it is. I can't see what it's made of. I think it's the way roofs were made before. Unfortunately, I don't know the English word for it.
Well, I've been to see some of the stave churches and so forth in Norway, and it almost looks like thatch rather than wood on an A-frame.
Yeah, it is in wood. It is in wood.
It is wood?
No, it isn't.
Oh, okay. Well, then it's thatch, you know,
Yeah.
on
Yeah, it is.
an A-frame. And of course you need the A-frame for the snow, because
Yeah.
if it were flat, it would disintegrate. But what's
Yeah.
interesting are the way that the crossbars at either end of the A-frame, they rise up like that, but then they stick up as though they had a I'm trying to think. It's a very Viking look. I mean, I've been to Anse-les-Meadows, which is the Norse settlement in Canada, and it looks vaguely familiar to me.
Yeah. And this is, I placed Hannah in a village called Kleva on Öland. And in Hannah's first chapter, she walks to the sea, and this is the road she takes. It's the road from the village to the sea. And these roads are all over Öland. I mean, it's so flat, and the roads are so straight. Yeah.
Is this a bicyclist paradise?
Yeah. and walkers, and yeah. Everyone who loves nature. And this is the school in Gårdby. In The Night Singer, the reader gets to follow Joel during his last day, and the school plays a big part in that last day. Gårdby is the village where Hannah grew up. And this is the bus stop in Gårdby. It also has a role in the story. And this is the church in Gårdby, just behind the bus stop.
And one of the things that I remember very clearly about Sweden are the churches and the graveyards that surround them. And how beautifully tended they are, and how generally filled with flowers they are.
There's a church in almost every village on Öland, and there are a lot of villages.
Right. So they're predominantly Protestant, or are they all Protestant?
They are Protestant. I don't even know if there are any Catholic churches on Öland. Maybe, I don't know.
I don't know either, but my impression was that they are primarily Protestant. And, you know, in a lot of Swedish crime fiction, Johanna, there are cults, and there are some very strange religious groups that figure in many novels set in Scandinavia. And
I have written one of those as well. Yeah.
Aha. Well,
yeah.
Anyway, so I just assumed that in general it was a Protestant country. I don't know if it's Lutheran or some other, you know, offshoot branches or whatever. But honestly, the churches and the churchyards, in my experience, are beautiful. And if not community centers, at least it's clear that people really tend the graveyards and, you know, and spend time there. I can remember watering cans being in the graveyards, you know, for the convenience of those who are coming to do the beautification and so forth. We don't, I think it's a wonderful thing for the village to remember the people that lived there and are buried there.
Yes, it is.
So, so there's a boy found in the shelter behind that wall that you showed us. And without any spoilers, what happens after that? Just a little preview.
Well, she goes to the mother and tells her that her kid is dead. And that's where the investigation starts. I don't know what to say without giving too much away.
Well, maybe we should just talk about themes. I mean, I've read a number of, I've read the book and truly enjoyed it. A number of critical comments, many of them from Swedish reviews. And one of them says, and I think this is interesting, that Mo, or is it Mo? How do we pronounce your last name?
Mo.
Mo, okay.
Mo.
I can't do it.
Don't do it. Mo is fine.
Mo is fine. Okay. Explores themes of bullying, infidelity, familial violence, discrimination based on sexuality and gender. In short, many of the bugbears that plague 21st century Western culture. Now that's a very big load.
It is.
Wow. And so, you know, this is your first novel published in English, translated in English, but this isn't your first published novel, is it, in Sweden?
This is my, I have to count, it's my 7th novel. So I have been doing this for a while.
Right. So you've had an opportunity to not only work on your craft and structure and so forth, but also develop themes. Are these themes that you've explored to some extent in your earlier books?
I would say so. The most important theme for me is guilt and loss, I would say. And those are, a big part of the Night Singer. The other themes, I mean, I didn't really think about them when I wrote. I think about the characters, families and relations. Yeah.
Right. And also, I think in Hannah's case, shame which arises, I think, from guilt in part, but shame is a big motivating force for her.
Yeah, it is. The shame is connected to her father, but also to the friend,
right?
Who she now has to deal with, because
right.
she left without telling her. She felt she needed to do that, otherwise she wouldn't have been able to leave. So she didn't even tell her friend that she was going. She phoned her a few days after she had run away.
Well, yeah, I mean, abandonment is a very hard thing.
And they tried to keep in touch after that, but they failed. And Hannah didn't even know she had a kid.
So the fact that this boy was murdered is particularly terrible for Hannah and her friend. And it's either going to break their relationship or it's going to forge a new one. And we aren't going to talk to you about which choice happens, but it's certainly clear that, you know, couples that lose a child very often don't survive as couples. There are infinite examples of couples where a child has died and the marriage breaks up and so forth. Yeah. And I don't know that I've explored it that much in terms of friends, you know, where a child is killed and they are associated not directly in the death because, you know, the mother lost the child, Hannah's investigating the death, but nonetheless, a child dies and what effect that would have on their friendship.
Yeah, and the scene where Hannah tells her friend that her kid is dead is a very long one, and it's told both from Hannah's perspective and from the friend's perspective. The friend is called Rebecca, because I don't know. I've had police come to my door and give me that kind of news, and I wanted to get to that as well, because the friend is really, I don't know, detached. She gets angry with Hannah because she comes to her and tell her these news, and it's not a good start to, I mean, kind of rekindle the friendship. They really struggle to do that.
Well, it's not uncommon to experience the kill the messenger sort of reaction, you know. No, you've thrown a lot of challenges to this couple. How did you decide in what voice to tell the story? You know, you can tell a story in first person or third person. Generally, it's not a good idea to use the familiar second person, but occasionally people do that. And did you decide to change your point of view at various times in telling the story?
No, the third person was the obvious choice for me here, because I wanted to have 4 perspectives. It's Hannah and her colleague Eric and Joel and Rebecca, the friend. These are the 4 people who tell the story. And if it would have felt weird to have it in first person then. The only thing I changed is the tempus. I don't know if it's called that, tempus.
The pacing?
No, if it happens now or if it has happened.
Oh, past
Yeah.
tense. I'm sorry. Okay, present tense or past tense, right?
Yeah, tense. Yeah, okay. I changed that in from the beginning. The entire story was in past tense, but then I wanted to tell Joel's story in that it happens now, to just kind of differentiate it more from the other perspectives, since it takes place before, because you get to follow the victim before the investigation starts.
That takes a lot of skill. Do you think that if this had been your first book, you would have been brave enough to try that?
No, I don't think I would have been brave enough. And I think that's part of the reason why I waited so long to write this story, actually. Because this is the first story where I write about the part of Sweden where I grew up. So it's more close to home for me than Stockholm. And also it has to do with the theme of Hannah and her father. To have a killer in the family. And I felt that I needed to be a good enough writer to do it.
Well, I don't think good enough is not, I don't think that's being fair to yourself. I would say experienced enough would be a much fairer description, because after all, writing is a craft that people learn.
It is. It definitely
and you learn it by doing it, by practicing and making experiments and making mistakes. But it seems, and if this is the start of a series, you also have to be thinking ahead, not just about writing The Night Singer, but about what you want to do, because you're committed to a number of things when you set up your first book that you have to carry forward. You can't suddenly have her father bound back to life or not be a killer, or the friendship not have been fractured, or the boy not have died when you go to book 2.
I had a plan for the background story from the beginning. I made a plan for about 3 books before I started writing the first one. But it has already grown and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to make it in 3 books, actually, but we'll see.
Well, we have a lot of experience with authors who thought they could tell a story in 2 or 3 books, and now we're suddenly at book 9 or 10. We are the Outlander bookstore, and when we started, Diana originally was going to write, if she got past book 1, a trilogy, and it's morphed along because the story just keeps growing, and that's true of many authors.
I've listened to the entire Outlander.
Right. Well, then right, but it's not just that story. I mean, writing a series and writing standalones are different challenges. We had we discussed that often about the whole world building aspect. If you choose to write different books every time, then you have to start world building with every single book. You have to create, everything in it. If you write a series, you have to do the world building too, but it's different. You have to carry forward the world that you built, but then figure out how to expand it. And it seems to me that's the point at which these stories grow, Johanna, and catch the author by surprise.
Yeah. I love the world building part and the story building part. I think that's maybe why I choose to go with series. I've written one standalone only in crime fiction. I've written one series before, and it consisted of 4 books. But then I had a picture of 4 books from the beginning, and I stuck with that.
So do you think that those books will be picked up and translated into English?
I have no idea.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting thought. Why would you say that this book, The Island Singer, has prompted an English translation? Because translating is a very expensive thing for a publisher to do. It's not it's not, I mean, it takes a lot
Yeah,
of
yeah.
resources, hiring a
Yeah.
translator, paying a translator, the whole bit.
When I came up with the idea for this new series, I got a literary agent, which I didn't have before.
Ah,
And they have helped a lot with getting the translations done. But I think it has to do with Ireland as well. It's a more, I don't know, exotic environment than Stockholm, maybe.
well, there's an enormous amount of,
Yeah.
if you want to call it Scandi noir, Nordic noir,
Yeah.
the Scandinavian crime wave, all kinds of things. And much has been written about. I think that Öland is I still can't say it right, Öland, is new territory. Rather than, as you say, Stockholm, which, is urban crime, much more so.
Yeah.
I've been up to Lapland on the train. There's a wonderful train service that goes from Stockholm up north. And I fell in love with Lapland. Of course, I was there in July. So, I was more likely to love it in July. But Sweden, we've driven all around Sweden. That particular trip was by train, but earlier. And Sweden has a wonderfully, it has varied landscapes, beautiful, beautiful spots. But most of the crime writing is either in some remote village where there's a cult or some strange thing going on, or you're down near Denmark, the bridge that connects Denmark to Sweden at the southern tip. Henning Mankell, of course, really was one of the basic, one of the roots of the Scandinavian crime fiction interest in the United States. And said, I won't try this one either, but I'll call it Malmo. You tell us how you really pronounce it.
Malmö.
Malmö, okay.
Yeah.
Became familiar to many of us. And the first time that I went to Sweden, we drove down there. So because, and that was in the 90s. So we could visit it and see the bridge that goes across to Denmark. But I think your island is so far not been pillaged by crime writers.
No, there's only been one before, actually. Johan Theorin, and I think he has been translated to English. I don't, at least.
Who's that?
Johan Theorin.
No, I'm not familiar with it, no.
But no, not as many as Skåne or Gotland. Many crime writers have written about Gotland. But for me, it was the only part of Sweden available, except for Stockholm. Yeah.
There we are.
Because I prefer to write about something I know about, especially when it comes to the environment. I couldn't have placed this story anywhere else in Sweden. Yes.
There's I'm trying to remember if her name is Annika Bergström has written. I'm trying to think, because I've read a lot of Swedish crime, but I've also watched a lot of Swedish crime. Yeah. And that's a village north and outside of Stockholm. I think it's Bergström has written. Annika, do I have this right? I may have the author and the characters' names mixed up, so my apologies there. And I don't know where.
Doesn't ring any bells. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't know where Camilla Lackberg's village is. Fjällbacka. Where is that?
It's on the west coast.
On the west coast. All right,
pretty
and
close
then
to Gothenburg.
Yep, and Helen Thurston has written a number of books set in what I'm going to call Gothenburg. And that's on the west coast of Sweden. It's big shipping. It's got massive shipyards and so forth, and some very cool museum of ships that you can go and visit if you're there. It also has a lot of art, if I recall. It's kind of a Western art capital. Right. So indeed, you have to stake out your claim.
Yeah.
Sort of like real estate, see how it works out. So the second book, do you have a title for it yet?
Yeah, it was published in Sweden in June, and it's called The Shadow Lily.
The Shadow Lady. That's a wonderful title.
The shadow lily. It's a flower.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
And then we realized the English name, because the shadow lily is a translation of the Swedish name, but the English name is a toad lily. So it's not going to be called that in English. A toad lily.
Got it. So Shadow Lily, not Lady, but it'll probably have a different title. All right.
Yeah.
So tell me how you feel about the translation. Obviously, you know, you speak wonderful English, and I assume, have you read The Night Singer in the English translation?
Yeah, I've actually read it twice because I've worked as a translator as well. I've translated a few books from English to Swedish. So I jumped on the opportunity to actually read my own work in English. And I think the translation is amazing. It really feels like my story.
Does it change anything? I mean, obviously there are lots of words that are not direct replacements or emotions that are difficult to, you know, pinpoint in either language.
I wouldn't really say that it changes anything, because what it changes are only minor details that don't matter. I mean, so no, yeah, it definitely feels like my story.
Well, that's wonderful. Have you thought about writing a work originally in English?
No, I haven't.
But you might.
No, we'll see.
No?
We'll see.
Well,
I've written shorter pieces in English only because I actually studied in Canada for a year. So yeah, I had to write in English then.
Well, I can see that writing in your native language about a place in Sweden would certainly feel like the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So in your work as a literary critic, what does that actually mean? Because literary critic can embrace almost anything. What did you do as a critic?
I wrote mainly about crime fiction for one of the Swedish, for one of the big Swedish newspapers. But I quit after a while because it became too difficult for me to do that, since I was writing myself, and also I worked as an editor, so I had to say no to a lot of books they wanted me to review because I had worked with them or I knew the people who had written them. So yeah, I quit after a while.
Yes, well, bookstore and publishing politics can be a swamp.
Sweden is a small country, yeah.
Absolutely. So for those of you who don't know, Sweden has its own version of the Edgar Awards, and I believe I have this right. It's called the Glass Bell Award for crime fiction. Do I have that right?
The what?
I believe in English it's called the Glass Bell.
Glass Bell.
I'll have to look it up. But there, what would you call there are awards for crime writing in Swedish. What do you call them?
Crime writers, deckarförfattare.
Well, all right. I'm going to Google Glass Bell here. Because I think I have that right. But that doesn't mean that it's an accurate translation. And maybe I am confusing it with some other award, but we'll find out. Let's see what it says here. Well, that's not getting me anywhere. Tell you what, Patrick, why don't you come back and talk to Johanna about any questions that might have, and I'm going to dig into the question of what the Swedish crime writers call their award.
No problem. I'm actually looking up on Wikipedia.
Oh, good.
I think I think you mean it's the Scandinavian, the glass key.
Maybe it's
okay.
Glass Key.
Yeah,
okay, Johanna, I'm not going to get this pronunciation even remotely right, but it says the Swedish Crime Writers Academy. Is it Svenska?
Deckarakademin.
Yeah, there you go. So that's the name of the academy, and so I guess they award, have different awards each year. The best Swedish crime novel, the Martin Beck Award, named after, of course.
Yeah, they call it the no, it's the glass key is the Scandinavian equivalent. Yeah.
Oh, glass
It's
key.
the- yeah,
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 for
the glass
Dashiell
key.
Hammett.
Yeah.
Well, I was close. The Martin Beck
Yeah,
Award,
close.
of course, is from Henning Mankell. Right, and we have had at the Poison Pen a number of visits from
Yeah.
crime writers, including the gentleman who took up the girl with the tattoo.
Dragon tattoo. Yeah.
Yeah, the girl with the dragon tattoo sequel. And you know, I felt sorry for him. He worked first place. It was July, and he was
Yeah.
wearing a coat, so he almost died of the heat. That was the first. Oh, but you know, he was proficient in English, but it was clearly very much of a strain for him to, you know, to have a long conversation, as it would
Yeah.
be for one
Yeah,
of us
yeah,
trying to speak in another language. And when it was over, we normally take authors out to dinner, but I decided it would be a greater kindness if I took
let
him
him go.
and his Swedish speaking escort back to their hotel and left them to converse in Swedish rather than having to include me. But
I actually had him as a teacher when I studied literature.
did you really?
Yeah, I did.
Wow. And you
That-
know, that
so-
was a brave thing for him to take on. don't you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah,
mean
I
Steve
mean-
Larson or David Lagerkrantz?
David
It
Lagerkrantz.
was David. Yeah.
But I'm okay with it's with speaking in English. It's not a strain, but it's at the same time it's easier for me to speak in Swedish, obviously.
Right. Well, of course it is.
Yeah.
And, you know, and traveling on top of it. But I remember saying to myself, you know, that clearly the kind thing to do is just drive them back to their hotel and leave them to talk to each other, which is great. Now, Camilla Lackberg and I have had a number of conversations, and we have one coming up. Patrick, it's being rescheduled because it failed while I was in Santa Fe. It failed on the train, right? Where Camilla was traveling.
Yeah. Yeah, they had some sort of incident on the train that prohibited her from getting back home in time.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Right. And her English
The train's not working is a big issue in Sweden.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Well, her English is very good. And it's always fun to talk to her. And she has a new series that involves some very high flying group of people, a very high powered woman executive. And it's fun to read. It's a lot different than the Fjällbacka, although I think there's some ties to it. And that also has been made, some of it, the Fjällbacka, into television.
Yeah.
So any of you are really interested in all this, if you went to MH as in Harry, Z as in Zebra TV, you can find a lot of Scandinavian streaming of various crime shows and so forth, which I have to say are really addictive.
Yep.
So maybe
what do you like to read?
The Island Mysteries will one day turn into one of those. Anyway, Patrick, do you have questions or comments?
I do, yeah. So what do you like to read, Johanna? Who are some of your crime fiction heroes?
I've been a bookworm since I learned how to read. So I read a lot, not only crime fiction, but some of my crime fiction favorites, if I start with Swedish ones, are Arne Dahl, Camilla Grebe, Kristoffer Carlsson. Yeah, and I think Kristoffer Carlsson is being translated to English now, so you'll be able to read him soon. And I also like, if I leave Sweden, I like writers like Ruth Ware, Alex Marwood. I am a big fan of Stephen King. I often bring
Stephen
him.
King?
Yeah, I am.
It's not a dirty secret to like
No,
Stephen
it's not.
King.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Let's see.
I have so many favorites, so I always feel guilty about the ones I leave out.
Yeah.
I really read a lot.
it's interesting because we always knew that there was a very vibrant crime writing scene in Sweden and in Germany and in some of the other European countries. And so much of it until the last, I don't know, 15 years, would you say, Barbara, just wasn't being translated.
Well, very little is translated from German.
Really?
Germany has never somehow or other seized the American market, but there is an enormous body of work that is Swedish, Norwegian, Danish, and a couple of Finnish. There was a wonderful American who lived in Helsinki and wrote 3. I can't think of his name, of course, naturally. Wrote 3 absolutely killer, maybe 2, absolutely wonderful books. And unfortunately, he died of cancer.
Was that James Thompson?
I don't remember his name, Patrick. It might well have been, but I fell in love with his, because I think Finland is a wonderful country. I'm very fond of Helsinki. I'll never forget the market down there, when you get off the ship and there you are at the fabulous market down there on the water. And I wish there were more. So Sweden, I think, is the predominant one, although there are many, many Norwegian writers who also have been translated into English. Is there, Johanna, is there a big appetite for English authors translated into Nordic languages? In Scandinavia?
Yeah, there is, I would say. Not as big as Swedish writers, I think. I'm not sure.
Well,
maybe I shouldn't talk about things I don't know, but I think, yeah. But I prefer, I don't read English writers in translation. And yeah.
Do you read them in English?
Yeah, I do.
My experience was that most people, a very large number of people in Sweden do speak English. Is it part of education of one foreign language, not necessarily English?
Yeah, you always start with English, and now, I mean, they start already in first grade to learn English. And also in Sweden, television isn't dubbed, so you hear the English and you see the subtitles. So I mean, you hear it from early on.
So
yeah.
Okay, so that means that a lot of people
and then after that, you always pick another language. So I've studied French as well, but I wouldn't be able to have this conversation in French. No.
I could barely do it. That was my second language. Right,
it depends. It depends on what you choose. I mean, I studied sciences, so that's why I only learned 2 other languages. If you choose humanities, you often study even more languages.
Right.
Because you can't only speak Swedish and go about in the world.
So tell me a little bit about, I mean, I've been to Uppsala, not to study, and I probably pronounced that wrong too. But anyway, the university at Uppsala is it's a venerable Swedish university. Yeah. The town is wonderful, and there's a terrific walk you can take from the ancient graves. There's
my husband went to the university in Uppsala, but I hadn't even been to Uppsala before I met him. Yeah, I studied in Stockholm.
Okay.
Because I knew that I wanted to work with literature, and if you want to do that, Stockholm is the city to be in
is
Sweden.
It?
That's where all the publishing companies are. There are some in the south of Sweden, Malmö, but not many.
Have you had a chance to interview a lot of the crime writers, or was that not something that you do?
No, I didn't really do that. No,
you didn't, because I know we've had quite a few. Håkan Nesser was here.
Yeah.
Who else? Quite a few, Barbara.
His books sadly have not caught on in the United States as much as some other authors, and I'm not sure why. There's very good television
Yeah,
of some of his
yeah, and
books.
he's a really good writer. I've worked with a lot of the crime writers in Sweden, sometimes as an editor, but even more often as a proofreader, because I've been a proofreader as well. So I've proofread Organizer.
There's Kjell, is it Kjell Eriksson? Is that right?
Eriksson, yeah.
I don't, there's so many.
Yeah.
Helen
Yeah.
Tursten, is that right?
Helen
Detective
Tursten, we
Inspector
talked
Huss.
about, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
she writes about the west coast of Sweden, or has, and now she's doing a new series with an old lady, which makes it strikes right at my heart. You know, although I don't think I'm really quite the old lady that she's writing about, but nonetheless, I am one. Arnie Dahl, I think, is DAHL.
Yeah, he's one of my. I always mention him. I think
right,
he's
and then there's
such
someone named, is it Astrid Lundgren? Do I have that right? Lundgren. I'm not sure how one pronounces it. Anyway, that might be slightly wrong.
Even I don't know all the crime writers in Sweden.
Well, and they're published across a wide range of companies. I mean, it isn't like there's one U.S. publisher that publishes only you know, Scandinavian crime fiction. So it's a little hard to keep up.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions there, Patrick?
Have you had any television or film interest in your books yet?
No, not that
yet?
I know of.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Hopefully soon.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
What's next for you? Have you already finished another book, or are you working on something?
I'm working on it. I'm supposed to leave the draft for the third installment in the series to my publisher in the end of August. So I only have a few weeks left to do it.
Are
But
you going to make your deadline?
It's under control. I'll make it. Yeah.
And it might not be the third and final book. It might actually expand.
No, it's not going to be the final.
Oh, good.
Book. I've already told them that.
How long does it take you to?
With this series, I felt that I didn't want to. Decide on a number. I want to keep doing it as long as I feel that I have more things to tell about Hannah Dunker. So, but at the same time, I can't really see myself writing 10 books about the same character. I already have the ideas about books I'm going to write later on.
Wonderful. You know, as long as you have ideas coming, how you choose to present them is a different question. You know? So, and once you get something going like a translation into English for one series, it becomes easier to find a larger market for other series. Yeah, and
it's been translated to many other languages as well. I mean, before this one, I hadn't any translations at all. I think I had one translation into Polish, but this one is going to be translated to 17 languages. So That's quite new for me.
Well, that is impressive. Good for you.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really looking forward to reading more about Hannah spending more time on Udan. Which I found it fascinating. So our copies have arrived. Patrick has already shown you, the cover. And I certainly recommend it for whether you're a fan of Scandinavian crime fiction or not, doesn't really matter, because it's not a story that is limited to any one country, but it is broader themes and some really interesting characters. So it's really been a pleasure to talk to you, Johanna. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's been a real pleasure. I hope we'll get to see you for your next book. I'm sure we can. Right. So goodbye, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for being with us.
Bye.
Bye.
Hello. We hope you're enjoying our programs and podcasts with authors. We'd like to expand them, and your help would be appreciated. Please make a donation at poisonedpenfoundation.org. 100% of the proceeds will go to help connect authors with readers in this difficult time. Thank you.